Tennis star Serena Williams, Senator Kamala Harris, and businesswoman Melanie Hobson all have in common. They're all married to white men, but black women are the least likely group of women to marry, especially outside of their own race. A professor at Northwestern University explores these relationships in a new book called Interracial Relationships Between Black Women and White Men. And joining us now is the author, Cheryl Giudice, who's also a sociologist and adjunct faculty member in Northwestern University's School of Education and Public Policy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So why did you want to write this book?
I want to write this book, Brandis, because I know of so many women, black women, who never had a romantic personal relationship. And I've always felt very bad about that and sorry about that. And the reason for that, primarily, is because they limited their search to African American men. They never thought that any other men would be attracted to or by them. So they remained single.
You call this also a numbers issue. Why do you say that?
It's a numbers issue. There are far more black men than there are black women. And this starts at age 16. The same thing doesn't happen for whites to age 32. So for a black woman to limit her dating options to African American men by themselves, she has a very good likelihood of remaining single.
What's happening to cause that gap at such a young age, at 16, for black women?
Well, right, it begins with some of the things that happen to young black men. They have higher mortality rates than other groups of men, incarceration rates, things along that line that make it likely that there are far fewer of them.
You document some of the reasons why black women don't date outside of the race. What are some of the sociological reasons?
But based on the social, historical problems that this country has had, the historical relationships between some black men, black women and white men, that's primarily what it is. It's long entrenched, something that's going to be very difficult to change.
You also talk about self-esteem, and you write a little bit about black women being so-called less desirable. What is that?
Well, what it means is that really in this country, Western society values white women. They are at the top of the pinnacle in terms of beauty. So a black woman is not going to meet the same standards of beauty as a white woman, because for the most part, black women are blonde and blue-eyed, or even very thin. And that tends to be the standard that is most revered.
So why focus then specifically on the relationships between black women and white men as opposed to black women and any other race?
Because traditionally, black women with white men is the least common relationship. So I was curious, so how is it that men that are at the top of the social hierarchy are getting involved with women that would be at the bottom of the social hierarchy? So that was one of the first reasons for looking at that. There are far more black men married to white women than the reverse pattern. The other thing is that I didn't want to investigate black women married to other men of color, because you don't have the same social, psychological, or historical dynamics to deal with. So those relationships don't have the same aspects going on between them that white men and black women do.
How is the experience different for younger black women versus older black women, 50s and above?
It's far easier for younger black women to date and marry outside the race than it is for older women. They don't catch as much racism. They may deal with other kinds of microaggressions, but they don't have to deal with some of the problems that their older peers did.
It seems we're also seeing more of these sort of interracial relationships in the media. For example, I mentioned, at the top of this story, a number of celebrities as well. Is this good for all age groups?
Yes. What winds up happening is that you're seeing more interracial relationships in terms of advertising, as well as in terms of some shows out there. We're beginning to put out more positive portrayals of African American women, so that it does increase their visibility and hopefully, raises their profile in terms of desirability.
So let's talk about some of the stories in your book. You interviewed a number of women, obviously. There's a chapter on dating. We meet a woman named Celeste who's in her late 20s.
Yes.
Tell me about her. Who'd she meet?
Well, Celeste was a very interesting young woman. Celeste met a man at work, and she was interesting from the point of view that she was not a person that had trouble finding black men. But what she came to understand was that she had trouble finding black men that were willing to commit to an exclusive relationship. So she had been fairly popular, and because she did have some choice, she had some of her black girlfriends say to her, you better watch it because you're running out of men. And she kind of was a little choosier than they thought she needed to be. But she said she just couldn't see herself settling for someone just to say she, was married. So as it turned out, she met her, now I think they were going to get married, husband at work. And she wasn't initially attracted to him at all. It was just after they had worked together on a project. She said this ordinary white man she became really interested in, and apparently it was mutual, and they started to date. And she discovered that they had a lot in common. And eventually she had to tell the black guy that she was dating about it. She thought, I'm going to have to tell him about this. And her black boyfriend said, well, I'm not ready to commit. And she knew that, and she knew the reasons for it. But she started thinking, this isn't helping me. So she continued to date her white boyfriend. And that when he was ready to commit, she felt for the first time that, okay, now I know what I was missing. I was missing someone that really wanted me and me by myself. And I can stop looking and I can just enjoy this relationship. So that's where I left her.
Yeah. So you talk also about socioeconomic as well as educational status, because black women are often more educated than black men by numbers. And you talk about a couple, Denise and Todd. What do we learn from them?
Well, Denise and Todd were a very interesting couple. First of all, not only do you have the racial issue between them, you have a gap socioeconomically. Todd was from a very, very well-to-do family from Chicago's North Shore. And Denise was not, but she was not from such a lower income background, but given his background, she would have been much lower on the social scale. And he was actually her second white husband. Her first white husband was a guy that she met in college whose family could care whether or not she liked them or not. And she just said they were just redneck country people. But she stayed with her first husband long enough to have a child. So then she meets Todd. And Todd was this guy that was a pretty, I would say, liberal and also pretty urban. And he always had kind of a preference for darker skinned women. And in fact, it was her black woman friend that introduced the two of them. And her friend said, Jamora, I kept telling you, you really need to meet Todd because I think that the two of you will get along. Well, of course they did. And they did get along. And then she discovered after the relationship had been going on for a little while about his own socioeconomic background. So it's because one day he said to her, he said, let me tell you a little bit about my family. And she's thinking, now I'm going to hear about how, the family really feels. And he took the conversation in a direction she didn't expect. He said to her, no, he said, we probably have a little more than most other people. And so she then goes on to talk about not only how they got, how the relationship unfolded, but about how his family had a very difficult time dealing with her at first. Now, essentially, she had to teach them how to treat her. But they would do life adventures and things that happened. Now they are all very close because his family demonstrated to her when her son got in trouble how they were right there for her and didn't treat her son as if he were not part of the family. And then, of course, Todd and she have their own 2 children together, and they've been married now more than 20 years.
More than 20 years.
Yeah.
And I should probably tell viewers as well, I am a black woman who is married to a white man. Before I let you go, quickly, what do you want readers to take away from your book?
Well, the main thing I want readers to take away from my book, I have a message primarily to black women. Please do not limit your search for an eligible to an eligible black man, because the numbers are just not there to support it. Be open to dating outside of the race. Black, white, all those races in between as well. But don't limit your search to all the best childbearing years you have are gone, and then you wind up, and you may possibly wind up by yourself.
Okay, Cheryl Judice, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Again, the book is...
This is going to be a divestment episode. About the whole swirl community, the divestment community. I have something that I want to posit. All right. And before I do that, at the jump, I played an interview for you. It's not important and shit. I mean, it's important to the subject matter at hand and shit, but it's not important that I really go into it with this woman and shit because I'm gonna be talking some shit at the end of this. So during the interview, you know, during the interview, there were two case studies presented and shit, and I felt like I wanted to put those out first and shit, before actually talk about this episode and this female. Her name is Cheryl Judas. All right, then I'll go more into depth on that later and shit. But I want to talk about the case studies, so with two of which were presented in the book that she wrote, which were what's the name of that book? Interracial relationships between black women and white men and shit. One of the reasons that I'm talking about this is because she said that it was uncommon for black women to, be in relationships with white men and shit. I know that was complete and utter bullshit. Okay, I've been seeing it myself personally since around late 1986, 87 and shit. And I was in high school, and I was living in a bubble in the black community on the south side of Chicago. Okay, so the first case study she presented was, as you heard, if you can rewind that. I'm not gonna go into any great detail, but there was a woman that went by the name Celeste. All right, and this woman was weighing her options. She was doing, she was dating. She was living a career woman mindset. She was a modern woman and shit. Okay, and you heard how, you know, one of the reasons I'm doing the case studies first is because how, she dressed everything up and shit. But my bullshit meter, and by and large, my bullshit meter is your bullshit meter and shit. Like, I should call it a bullshit translator and shit. I'm gonna translate that for you. That first case study, that one, Celeste. Okay, now Celeste, in my opinion, she was presented as a modern woman who was having trouble getting men to commit, and she was dating out. She eventually dated out. She had no trouble finding any, suitors and shit for, the evening. All right, so I'm assuming she was uh, relatively attractive. Okay, because as we well know, most men are visual creatures. Okay, first and foremost, according to female propaganda and shit. I'll put it that way. So my bullshit meter, I'm gonna read this out and shit. I actually took the time to write this down. All right. So I say it's Celeste in her late 20s, who was a career woman, who was having problems getting men to commit in a relationship while living her best life and everything. Eventually ended up with the white woman. Okay, I mean with the white man. Sorry, Celeste, who was dating around and living her best life as a professional woman. She ended up with the white guy, with the white man. Okay, all right. I think they got married. All right. So my bullshit. I'm gonna translate that. Okay. Celeste in her late 20s. She is one of these women that you see at work. Is uh, what moderately to probably damn good looking black women and shit. Probably if she wasn't that good looking, she probably had some physical attributes and shit. So she is a covert 304. Okay, a covert 304. She's for the streets, as Future would say. And she probably was doing a bunch of work hookups because they said she was meeting most of her partners on the job. Okay, and that's a no-no, by the way. And I don't need to. Anybody with half a brain knows why you shouldn't be eating where you shit, as they used to say when I was a kid and when I was a young adult. So she engaged in work hookups. Okay, she's a covert 304. So much so that some other black women on the job, they pulled an intervention. All right, they pulled an intervention. They told her that she was running out of guys to date. But Cheryl Judas didn't present it that way. She put a lot of sugar on it and shit. But I'm gonna put a lot of salt. Okay, all right, because that's what we do here. All right, so Celeste in her late 20s, covert 304 for the streets all the way, fucking around at work, doing it so bad that other black women decided to have an intervention. She ends up meeting her eventual white husband on a project they were working on at work. All right. So she, even though they did an intervention, she when she decided to cross the color line to the white guy and shit, it was another guy at work and shit because I guess she has a problem with people, meeting people. So I'm gonna assume maybe she's not that attractive. That maybe she probably has a big ass or something. Probably has a killer body or somebody that a white guy would be into maybe. So she meets this guy on a work project. They start dating, I guess, quotation marks, probably fucking her, doing gutter sex, definitely. She described the white guy as ordinary and shit. And we know when they say that someone's ordinary, like if we put it through our translator, that's like the whole Michael B. Jordan corny thing. So this was a ordinary slash corny guy. And she said they had a lot in common and shit. That's total bullshit. I smelled hypergamy. I smelled it and shit. Okay, like a big bad wolf. I smelled the hypergamous criminality at work in her pea brain. Even though I don't know what this woman looks like or anything, I can only surmise from what was said by Cheryl Judas. All right, that she meets this ordinary guy. They have a lot in common. They're on a work. They meet on a work project. Probably banging this guy doing gutter sex. And when she said they had a lot in common, you have to translate that as money, stability, and what I am now going to term or innovate sexual laundering. Okay, I mean, what is sexual laundering and shit? Sexual laundering is when a woman is run through like a motherfucker, and then like in old days, women would like just move to another city and shit, change the number, get rid of the number, get a new phone and all the shit, and just assume another identity and just go like they had been doing all this messed up shit, and then you know the big head that they would eventually end up with after hitting the wall would just be amazed at like, how sexually proficient she is between the sheets, not knowing that what she was in her former life. I call that like a sexual version of money laundering and shit, okay? So what she saw in the ordinary corny white guy was that he has stability money and, he could clean up her reputation by being associated with her, all right? And on the flip side, we find out that she is quite malevolent because she's still dating her pookie, okay? One of her pookies, one of her guys in her rotation is obviously a pookie. No self-respecting man would fuck with a bitch that was messing around a bunch of guys and shit. So she's a jump. Well, she's from the streets. I already said that. So she's dating a pookie and the white guy. All right. And then she tells, Cheryl Judas lets us know that she informed the black guy that, she wasn't getting no younger or something. She put up sugar on it. But basically, the black dude kicked it to the curb. So I'm going to assume that black guy didn't know she was fucking around with somebody else. I don't think it mattered what the race was. A lot of us brothers really don't believe these racial myths that's perpetuated by the gynocratic bullshit, ruling body of our ethnic community. Don't believe those myths, okay? They're not true. We don't care that black women fuck white guys. We did. Back in the 80s when I was a kid, we thought it was quite funny. And I'll tell you why that later. So, black dude kicked her to the curb, and she described that Pookie as not stable. And eventually she married the white boy. So she pressured the white boy to marry her, and she got what she wanted. There's no update from Miss Judas and shit. Yeah. She got she got the stability she was looking for, the financial viability, money, and she got her body count laundered and shit, sexual laundered. All right, that's the first case. The second case, no 9 minutes and shit. Look at this recording. The second case was it was a couple, Denise and Todd. All right, this is complete hypergamous criminality and shit. By the way, Denise is obviously the black woman, and Todd is a white man. He's a white guy name, and Todd is described as coming from a well-to-do family from the north side of Chicago. So just think, just pearly things background on this one, okay? So we're just going to call Todd old money, all right? Todd came from a well-to-do family on the north side, okay? Money. Denise was lower middle class, okay? Denise, the black woman, lower middle class. And she's already hunting white men, okay? So I'm not going to say she's for the streets, but I'm going to assume she was from the streets, that she had a fair share of BBC in that box, used up peace leave, okay? And so Todd and Denise presented as a couple. Todd is her husband, and he is her second husband. Her first husband is also a white man that she was introduced to in college, and she described him and by and large his family as rednecks. Okay, and she gave this man a baby, so she brings a biracial to the table that is not the white man she's currently married to. Is not his progeny. All right, she brings a baby. She brings the baby to the table, and she already been ran through by at least one white guy that we know of. And I'm gonna assume some brothers got in her ass to crack their ass wide open. All right. Now she described the first husband as redneck. All right. And Todd she describes as liberal. Okay. That is another code word and shit. We could just stack that up with ordinary and corny and shit. So, he's probably ugly and shit. I hate to posit that he probably could be a small hat and shit because she said he was really into her culture and everything. So it's like maybe he could be a wigger, some sort of wigger or some sort of culture vulture. She was introduced to where she was working at through the internal swirler network. That's a friend. Another black friend has been fucking white dudes over there. So she was introduced to Todd through a friend, and hmm, yeah, she hit the financial jackpot because he's rich. She said that she had problems with his family, and that she had to treat them. She had, excuse the word, Sal. Uh, Denise says that she had to teach his family how to deal and interact with black people and shit. I'm being nice about that, and I'm doing a Cheryl Judas. I'm putting some sugar on it, and she already had her son. She already has a son from what she called a redneck, and I don't think that was fair. She's laying up with him. Redneck is a derogatory term for a low-income white person, and she had a biracial pookie already. All right, and she said that she knew she was in the right place because her son got in some sort of trouble, and the family came together to help the son. They really were there for her. She's total bullshit, and she eventually ended up giving Todd two children of his own. All right, she gave him two biracials. All right, that's all bullshit. These both of these case studies are they stink of criminal hypergamy and shit. Okay, it's not so much about the swirling; it's about the bullshit that was coming out the author of this book's mouth and shit. And that's Cheryl Judas and shit. And I'm now gonna do a short, proper commentary in the way that I do it and shit. And I hope you're still here listening to this fucking commentary. So here's the me part of the deal. The geek underground part of the deal and shit. This is my commentary, my feelings about this book that she's written and the shit that she was talking about, including the two case studies presented in that brief 9-minute interview, which was played in its entirety. All right, fair use and shit. Okay, now you take a good look at Miss Judas here. I do believe she is married to a black man, or was married to a black man. I don't know. I do believe she's married to that. I could be wrong. All right, but I want to be honest and say I believe she was married to a black guy, and I want you to take a good look at this middle-aged woman, this academic and shit, who has a very she has one hell of an educational pedigree. All right, well, this is the face of the modern woman post-war and shit that is looking at the rest of her life and shit and without a partner. Okay, this is the face of that. This is the standard bearer for that. And the only reason I'm saying that is because of the manner in which she presented her case studies. She put a whole lot of sugar on it that she didn't have to. She could have been quite honest and said number one was a jump off, a workplace jump off, and number two was a social climb out. All right, unapologetic. But she didn't do that. A lot of sisters, and I have a pet peeve about this shit, the code of silence for bullshit, misandry, and just malfeasant behavior of all manner of shit, in our community being perpetrated by the women in it and shit. It's one of the reasons that we have a lot of, that we have a lot of stopgaps and shit in our development as an ethnic community and shit. I think it's reprehensible for her to present those case studies in that way, knowing what she was knowing what she was honestly talking about and shit. Okay, it's just bullshit. All right, and I think she feels a certain way because she's an old broad, and she has a lot of friends that are old broads that she sees at wine tastings and shit. And, they talk about their grandkids or their nieces and nephews, the bitches that didn't, luck up and get a reach back and shit. All right, I just get tired of that I get tired of that bullshit, man. It doesn't lead our community anywhere. Shit, we can't progress and shit. And I always roll my fucking eyes when I see somebody studying psychology or talking to me about sociology with a misandrist, bend on it. When they like pull out the kid gloves when they're talking about what is obviously, reprehensible, socially reprehensible behavior and movement and shit. Okay, all right. I get tired of this shit. Okay, a lot of these middle-aged ass women with money and means and shit, they find themselves by themselves so their husband done got the fuck out and escaped out of the window, or he done just died off and shit. Probably happily so. You know, they're looking out the window. They got some fucking cats and dogs. They got some nieces and nephews and shit. Maybe they have some kids or something. And the kids can only when your kids get to adult age, they can only tolerate so much of grandma coming around and shit. Okay, and her talking about this whole deal. I know it was bullshit when she said that uh, there were more men than women and shit. There were, black men dated out more than black women. That's some bullshit. And one of the reasons that black women are with black men and shit is because they're at the bottom of the dating totem and shit through their own behavior and characteristics and shit. The same social myths they use to demonize us also affects them as well. But they're unable to see that even its own academic doesn't present anything, reasonable and shit. Okay, it's just everything's filtered through her lens and shit, and that is her right. It's a free country, But like, just to be honest and shit, she represents a post-wall misanthrope and shit, a spinster, a bust down, and somebody who's been around the block a couple of times and unable to close the deal and shit because they use their panties to get where they are and shit for the most part. Okay. And a lot of the guys, they won't allow guys to be with. You see any of these women married or in some kind of long-term relationship, like a Stedman Graham type of guy? That's a guy that is on a, I hate to say if it's on the down low or anything, but this is a guy who willingly capitulates and shit because he has nothing to lose and everything to gain for being in her presence. A lot of these women are going to pick men that are lesser than them economically, whether she wants to admit it or not, because they want to be in control. Any real guy with any kind of masculinity or testosterone run through his body is not going to be in a one-sided relationship with some woman that thinks she's above him and shit, okay? That she's a blue blood, thumbing her nose at his blue collar and shit. It just doesn't happen and shit. They go out looking for men that are less than him so they could, you know, son husband them at any age. I find it disheartening to find an elderly man, an old man, in a dysfunctional, codependent relationship with a accomplished older woman, either a year or two older than him or they the same age, where she's just talking shit and being an ass. All right, and then if you see them with younger guys, that's just about peen. A lot of them will slide up on younger guys and under the guise of helping them out with something. Okay. Oh, I helped him out. How many times have you heard some old broad say that shit? Oh, I helped him out and helped him get a job and this and that. Then he cheated on me. He was fucking these young girls and shit. Of course he's fucking these young girls. When he's sleeping with you, that's business and shit. But you can't recognize your own hypergamy thrown back in your face in the seat of his used boxers. Okay? And I think that, I think that her argument is like bullshit and that this book was written to placate some of her less fortunate friends. Okay, all right. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. If you hit the wall, that's a wrap and shit. Okay, that's a wrap. I'm 50 fucking four, and I'm an elder statesman community and shit. I'm not gonna be out here looking for some young piece of shit or something. I'm not looking for nothing. I'm completely. Now I would say I'm really really black pilled at this moment and shit, and not out of any anger or anything. It's just my logical thought process when I look at what's going on in that community and shit. And I just don't have the patience for no bullshit, no female bullshit. And when a female looks at my fucking face, they know the deal. And I think that when a guy looks at an old broad with a pocket full of money and nothing to real spend it on, nothing beyond her belongings, her baubles and everything. He's just like, well, hey, this is a business opportunity and shit. But of course, black men don't have the same PR agent and covering for the minority majority that women like Miss Judas here has and her associates. Right? So I think the book is bullshit. I think her argument is bullshit, and I decided to put this out. Shit. I hope you're still here with me. Hope you give me a like and a subscribe, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Okay. I think I'm done here. Okay. SYSBM equals Save Yourself Black Man.
This message has been paid for by the Dusties. Yes, the niggas you love to hate.